Today I'm going to be discussing the activity request process at Florida Blue. This is the process that I put in place to document and standardize all of the different kind of course, class, CVT requests that we get for our learning management system. We'll start with some introductions. My name's Brad Cooper. I'm a senior analyst, talent management systems at Florida Blue. I'm a system administrator, so I do regular administrative functions like creating these courses and classes and uploading CVTs, troubleshooting problems, system access stuff. But also I serve as a strategic functionality analyst. I basically take a look at the system. We use SumTotal as our learning management system. I take a look at functionality that's going to be rolled out in SumTotal in like the next couple of versions, and I test it to make sure that it's something that we would use and how we would use it. And then I roll that functionality out in phases as we go through the upgrade process. And I'm also involved in process improvement, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Personally, I have over 35 years of LMS experience. Some of you probably know a little company called Plateau. I was one of the founders, I was senior vice president, one of the main designers of the functionality of the application. Before that, I worked with a learning management system called Taskmaster. It was kind of a combination learning management system, instructional design, data management system. So I've been around the business for quite a while. The company I work for, Florida Blue, it's Florida's Blue Cross and Blue Shield insurance company. Cover about 5 million members, basically about 35% of the Florida health insurance market. So it's a big deal. It's a big company here in Florida. But Florida Blue is only one part of another company called Guidewell Mutual Holding Company. Guidewell has several other companies around the country and overseas where we are managing the learning management records and the assignments and things like that for those people as well. Some of the companies have their own SumTotal administrators, but many of them are just under the main umbrella of Florida Blue. Florida Blue is headquartered in Jacksonville, Florida. That's my hometown. Jacksonville is about the 4th largest city in the state, I believe. And it's a really nice place, but very spread out. It's the largest city in the country by land area-wise. So and it's fairly cosmopolitan. It's a very nice city. Our system manages the training and certification records of over 65,000 employees, contractors, external agents, and brokers. Basically, anybody who's an insurance agent in the state of Florida that sells Blue Cross and Blue Shield products, they are in my learning management system. And also in South Carolina and Texas and some other states where we've got different companies selling Florida Blue product, and their training is tracked in the LMS that I use. Our SumTotal implementation is internally branded. It's called Guidewell Learning. It manages all compliance, performance, and development training for multiple Guidewell companies across North and Central America, the Caribbean, and India. Now, my organization, I'm part of the overall human resources department, and within that human services group, as we call it, there are 2 sections that get involved with requesting courses and classes and that kind of thing. There's Enterprise Learning and Development Group, which includes the learning design and the learning delivery groups. And then there's my group, under Human Resources Shared Services, Learning Operations. And so we have a very distinct line of kind of a way that we demark our responsibilities. And it's basically Enterprise Learning and Development is responsible for all content issues. They're the ones that make the requests. They're the ones that tell us what the courses and classes need to be and when they're going to start and who's going to take them. And then they give it to us, and Learning Operations actually manages the learning management system to put that data in and make sure everything's working properly. The way I like to put it is Learning Operations were the people that make the trains run on time. But we don't get involved in content decisions or trying to make instructional design comments. Every now and then I might, but that's just because I'm also an instructional designer by background. But for the most part, we stay hands-off with content, and the people in EL&D don't have any hands-on with SumTotal. Okay, when I first started in as an administrator at Florida Blue, which was in August of 2017, we had a really, really haphazard process for doing these kinds of requests. Okay, most of the activity requests were emailed, phoned in, or IM'd to specific administrators with little to no documentation. I mean, we would write something down on a scratch pad. With multiple administrators, we didn't know what each other was working on. So sometimes somebody would send us a request, and two administrators would start working on it at the same time, and then we realized that, just a redundant thing. So we wasted some time. And it also makes it really inefficient for troubleshooting, because if one of the administrators sets up a fairly complex, like a curriculum assignment of some sort, asking one of the other administrators to go in and troubleshoot if there's a problem is rather tricky, because you didn't know all of the background information that went into this request. This was a big one. The requesters often gave us inaccurate or insufficient information to create the activities, resulting in delays and rework. What would usually happen is an email would come in and say, "Hey, Brad, I need you to schedule this class on such and such a day." Okay. Then I'd have to send back and say, "Okay, who's the instructor?" They'd send it back. "Here's the instructor's name. Who's going to be in it?" And so it was this email chain kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was really inefficient. And then if there was a change, one of the other administrators might get contacted to go and make the change, and the administrator that originally made the activity didn't know that anything was happening. So it was just rather chaotic. And without documentation, like I said, we'd put things on a scratch pad or we'd save the email somewhere. Without the documentation, there was no way to know who made a particular request and why. So we don't know, who requested this instructor change or who requested this change of the people on the roster of the course. So it made it difficult to troubleshoot and to kind of backtrack and find out why decisions were made. And like I said, with that first bullet point, a lot of times these requests, like I say, they were emailed in or phoned in. And so if as an admin, you weren't keeping really good records, it's really hard to remember, what person X told me 3 weeks ago about this course. So actually, there was no way to determine why a particular activity was changed and who made that request. And then one of the ones that I really got involved in early on in my administrative career here was reporting. Reporting was always an afterthought with our implementation. And it was something that always caught us at the 11th hour when somebody would put together this big complex curriculum or some other course. It would go out there and it's just about rolled out to production, and then all of a sudden they say, "Oh, well, the business stakeholder needs to see these reports." It's like, okay, well, it might take us 2 weeks to build some of these reports, so you probably should have talked to us about that earlier. So that was the as-was process. It was chaotic. It wasn't controlled. There wasn't a lot of documentation, and it resulted in a lot of redundancy and a lot of wasted time in communication. So what I did was I set out a way to make it better. How are we going to do this? So I was walking in with a whole bunch of people that had been doing business one way. And as a business process re-engineering guy, I always take a look back and see what it is they're really trying to accomplish. So what I found was we had 3 components in our corporate computing environment that can work together really, really well to help us document and manage this activity request process. First is Excel. We developed a form in Excel that people use to make their requests. So they don't have to guess what information we want or what information we need. We give it to them in a column. We'll see the actual report in a few minutes. So we ask them the questions of what they need. Who's the requester? Who's the designer? What's the name of the course? What's the description? Where's the file to upload? All those kind of questions we have documented on our Excel spreadsheet. Now, that's all well and good. However, the second element is another part of the key. SharePoint. We have SharePoint, and it's not the be-all and end-all for a lot of stuff, but for this particular application, it works perfectly for our needs. So the Excel spreadsheet is one piece. Where it's stored and how it's accessed in SharePoint, that's another key piece. And then the third piece of the puzzle is Outlook. Okay, so Excel is used to create the request form. The form is stored in a shared SharePoint folder, and then all communication relating to a request sent to or from a mailbox shared by all LMS admins. So all of the admins have access to a particular mailbox, and that's where all of the requests come in. They don't go to individuals. And if somebody does send it to an individual, that admin sends it to the LMS request mailbox. Okay? So it's Excel, SharePoint, and Outlook are the three keys. So developed an Excel workbook for activity creation modification. We call it an ARF, an activity request form, and it's stored in the SharePoint folder. The form is filled out by people in enterprise learning and development. Usually they're program managers or project managers. We usually don't take requests from just people in the field or from people that are not in EL&D management as a project manager. We normally just work through the PMs because they're the conduit for all their information. So they then send a link with the completed form in the body of the email to a mailbox shared by all sum total administrators. When an admin starts working on a request, they categorize it with their name. So when I go and I look at my LMS request mailbox, I know which activities are being managed by other administrators. And then when I pick one, I tag it for myself. After the request has been fulfilled, an email is sent to the requester. All request emails are stored, never deleted. So we always have a kind of a backup copy of what was requested and why, because a lot of times the emails have additional information on the that won't fit in the Excel spreadsheet or different than what they're expecting. And sometimes they just give us more like a high-level overview of what is what they're actually requesting. So if a change needs to be made or another activity created, like let's say, for example, we create a course and then somebody wants to have a class, okay? That same Excel workbook that was used for the original request is modified. They add a row for each new or changed request. So it basically works almost like a configuration management tool where you've got this one spreadsheet with a bunch of rows on it, and every row shows the history of the evolution, the change history of this activity. So each ARF, the request form, is related to one set of activities, and those are either related by relationship, in other words, an ILT course, same course but virtual, all the related classes, related assessments, or by program or project. If you've got 4 CVTs around one program, then we can use those on the same ARF. Routinely, though, it's usually a one-to-one relationship. One ARF deals with one kind of course activity. EL&D requesters can create a new ARF, but they can't edit the requests on an ARF that have already been fulfilled, so they can't go back and change things. Let's say, for example, we have a class that starts on a certain day and time. If they want to go in and change the day and time, they can't just go back into the form and make the change and submit it. They add a new request row saying that they're changing this activity, and that then they put in what the new date and time is, and then we know what needs to change. And they can't delete an ARF. We're the only ones that can delete an ARF. So what we do is we routinely, if a program is no longer going to be used, we archive them. We have an archive folder in there as well. So the ARFs are usually never deleted. Even the ones that are kind of really long and involved and have been superseded by a lot, we move those to the archive folder too, just in case we need a little historical reference. And this is what the form looks like. Like I said, it's basically a big Excel workbook. There are obviously a lot more columns than you can see here. If you can see the scroll bar down there at the bottom. And so it's organized in a way where we keep track of which request number, what type of request it is, the date the request is submitted and so forth, notes, content folder location. This is for a CVT. And notice along the bottom are the tabs. The tabs are also another part of the key part. So it's CVTs, ILTs, virtual ILTs, hybrid ILTs, which is it's an ILT that you were both doing in the classroom and live. And on like Adobe Connect is usually what we use. QAS could stand for Quick Assessment, which is a function in SumTotal that allows you to create quizzes that are fully contained within the database. And then there's a custom Quick Assessments, job aids, documents, and so forth. These are all the different types of activities that we have that we use in Guidewell Learning. There are some other hidden sheets. I'll talk about those in a second. But so this is the blank activity request form for a CVT. This is where it starts for everybody. But to give you an idea of how much data we actually ask for, this is the column layout for an ILT that we ask for. So name, description, owner, designer, developer, notes to user, content type, any new hire, custom notification templates, all these different pieces of information either we get from the person submitting the request, or let's say, for example, like the activity code, we develop the activity codes. So we generate that and add it to the form ourselves. So there's a lot of data we ask, and each one of those tabs has different columns on it because of the nature of the training is different. This is what a completed activity request form would look like. Okay, so it's 10 requests, add class offering, change, add class offering, change activity. So you can see where every time there's a change, it's documented. And if this were live, I could scroll off to the end and I could show you that the administrators put a date stamp on it with their ID, so that if it says change activity, blah, 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 I can go over there and say, oh, okay, this other administrator did this. I need to ask them a question about it. Also notice at the bottom where the tabs are, you'll notice the tabs are green. What that is, that's our sign that everything on these tabs is complete, that there does not need to be any work on it. When something does change, let's say, for example, they wanted to come up and, let's say the submitter for this one wanted to add another class. They'd create request number 11, they'd add a class offering, and then they would turn the VILT tab to red, indicating to us that there's work that needs to be done on that tab. If one of the assessments changes, they'd go to the Quick Assessment tab and turn that one red as well. So that's what a filled out request form looks like. Some of the features of the request form that make it really, really useful, things like the form has data validation, select lists, pop-up help, it locks, lock cells and things. So the data validation helps the submitter understand what data we're asking for, because some of it is in what I call Guidewell Learning speak, because we have to, the system asks us that question in that format. So we have to tell the user what data they need to give us. So if it's something like that, we usually put it in a pop-up. So you can see for the ILT, the pop-up validations: create a course, add class offering with sessions, change activity. And then the pop-up help, as you scroll across the form, boxes pop up that tell you what kind of data we're asking for. Tab colors, I pointed those out a little earlier. The tab colors help point out things that need to be worked on and the status of that work. So we know if somebody goes in and creates a class for a VILT class but didn't change the quick assessments, we know that the quick assessment tab would be red, the VILT tab would be green. So the next administrator that comes along, or if it's me, I know where to pick up where I left off. We use the Excel sheet security settings. It provides the data integrity of those completed requests. So as I mentioned earlier, the submitters can't go in and make changes to things that they've already requested and they've been fulfilled. So they have to create another row. So we protect the sheet, and we have a password that only the administrators know. And so that it helps keep the change history from getting corrupted. And then we have some hidden sheets that we use as administrators, because there are things that if you're not a learning management systems person, this stuff is all Greek. Going in and creating report schedules, building audiences, and building curricula. Those are complex tasks that require a lot more in-depth knowledge of how the learning management system operates. And we don't expect our enterprise learning and development people to know all the deep ins and outs of using Guidewell Learning. That's what we're there for. But we use sheets hidden on the form to keep ourselves organized. Like when I'm building a curriculum, I can see what the whole curriculum structure and whether or not things have prerequisites and stuff like that. So we use the hidden sheets and we add them to that ARF so that when we as an administrator call up the ARF, we can see all the information about a particular request. Okay, where did we win? This was a process. It went through 2 phases. The first phase was kind of clunky, but it set the stage. And then when I came along as an administrator, I basically polished it up a little bit and made a few procedural changes. And it's worked out incredibly well. We have an organized, repeatable, and documented process for managing activity requests and changes, something that had never happened before. So anybody who has access to that SharePoint folder can go in and take a look at all the ARFs that came before. And you copy, they can go in and see all the change history, they can see everything related to it. So it makes it a centralized point that everybody accesses the same data, and it's all documented. Significant reduction in errors. I can't stress how much this helped. And errors, confusion, rework, and delays due to complete information. Because it used to take us sometimes 2 or 3 days to schedule a class because the requester would go on leave the next day and wouldn't be back until 2 or 3 days later. So we would have to wait until they got back to ask them a couple of questions, and we have to try to find their boss, and they don't necessarily know what the particulars of the class are. So it's resulted in a huge decline in errors, almost unnoticeable. And if there is an error, you can go back to the ARF and check and see what the request actually asked for. It's like, oh, okay, my bad, I forgot to do this. Or, hey, you requested this on the ARF. If you need this change, you need to submit a change request. The ARFs are, in essence, a change management tracking tool for our activities. They keep a comprehensive history of all requests and changes so you can see when changes were requested and by whom. Using the shared SharePoint folder and the shared mailbox, admins know what has been worked on, is currently in work, and who is currently working the request. So if there are questions, I can go ask one of my other admins about it. If somebody sends me an IM about something that I'm not working on, I can go find out who is and ask them about it. And additionally, the shared mailbox provides one point of contact for all activity requests. So if we have a request that comes in and we have questions about it, and we need to ask the submitter something, we send an email out of that LMS request mailbox to the submitter, and then the submitter, when they reply back to the LMS request mailbox so that we have a comprehensive list of all of the email correspondence related to a particular activity. This is really helpful when you're trying to build the change history, besides the ARF, but things like who changed, the instructor changed. We're adding a new link for the virtual classroom, things like that. So we keep all those emails. We just keep them. We have a whole mail. We have a mail folder of all the requests that we fulfill, and then we have another folder that's just all the ancillary correspondence about a particular activity. So, not to say everything was all, smiles and unicorns. This was a tough process, and took us a couple of years to fully implement it and get it configured and get it working. So what were some of the challenges that we faced, and how do we get over them? Well, there was a huge cultural change from informal personal contact to a formal process. Florida Blue is an old company, and it's a very focused on, or at least it has been in the past, not anymore thanks to COVID-19, has always been one of those companies where you went up and you asked somebody at their desk. You went to Building 6. They're on the 5th floor in Building 6. I'm going to take a little stroll over there and ask them about this course. That was the Florida Blue Way. People knew people. People had been working there for 18, 20, 25 years. And they were used to just calling somebody and saying, hey, I need this done, I need this changed. By creating a formal process, it kind of breaks that whole chain where, I don't get somebody calling me to say, hey, can you change the instructors on this course, on this class? I say, submit a request. You got to submit a request. And there was some pushback at first, but it's been changing, especially my entire group is scattered across the state. We don't have anybody that actually works in Jacksonville in learning operations. And now with all the remote employees set up for the pandemic, the reliance on this formal process is even more important. So they're used to calling the admin they worked with before. Insistence on following procedure irritates some people. They just don't want to do it. They think it's an extra step that gets in their way. And then there was difficulty following the actual procedure. Okay, it wasn't terribly difficult, but if you're not used to it, it could be a little confusing, especially this great big long spreadsheet that you got to fill stuff out on, and you don't know if what you need to fill out and how you need it to be and what data you're asking for, that kind of thing. So, and regardless, complex requests still require discussions. You still have to go and, when we're building a curriculum, I still have to have several emails back and forth and some virtual meetings about how they want this to work, how they want it to behave, things like that. And then a lot of times we fill in the ARF based on that data. I created a bunch of job aids, mainly besides the pop-up help, I created a document that's in that shared SharePoint folder. That's a PDF document that basically outlines the entire process and how it works and it goes through each tab on the form and explains what all the columns are and what data is being asked for. Of course, most people don't read it anyway. So they just try to, bull in a china shop their way through it, and then it goes back to them. And we are fairly strict about if someone sends us a request that's incomplete or hasn't been filled out yet, we pop an email right back to them and say, hey, you need to fill this out. And that irks some people, but we need to have all that documentation in there. We want them to do the documentation so that it's not, oh, I sent it to the learning ops people and they must have messed up. So that's why we insist on it. And so I created the job aids, but like I say, I'm still surprised when somebody from learning ops asks me about this process, and I asked them if they've read the guide, and it's what guide? So anyway. One of the other things we did was we started a session of lunchtime meetings on general learning operations issues. And one of the biggies was discussing the activity request process and how to fill out an ARF. I've done one of them. We're planning on doing another one. So it's something that we get everybody together for a noontime thing. It's all virtual. We're using either Adobe Connect, or we're setting up a SharePoint meeting, a Skype meeting. So we go through and we do screen shares and we show people how to go through how to use the form and how to fill it out. And it's been incredibly valuable because not only do the people in EL&D get a better insight as to how this process works and how they need to fill the form out so that we have all the data we need to create the activities. But it also gives them a little more insight into how learning operations does its business. Since we are in two different parts of human resources, there's not a whole lot of, let's say, resource sharing. And it's kind of like for a lot of people in EL&D, the things that we people in learning ops do is just completely opaque. They have no earthly idea how we do what we do or why we do it. So that's one of the things these lunchtime meetings have done is kind of destigmatize that and to kind of break down that wall so that we have a more open and connected culture. Because, like I say, we're the people that make the trains run on time. If they make a mistake, it's an error that goes and gets corrected. If we make a mistake, we might be assigning training to 10,000 people or creating a curriculum that doesn't work. So we have to have all this information, and it has to be right. And then course, this is one of the always challenges, managing permissions to the SharePoint site. Once we finally got that figured out, everything started working okay, but we still have to go in, and every now and then we have to add somebody to the folder permissions, because for some reason they're not seen as being in the organization that has permissions for it. So those are some of those are probably, I haven't done any SharePoint work in a while, so it's been working pretty well. But that's been a really good tool to use for this, since it does provide us the utility that SharePoint gives you of the being able to go in and have that one point of contact for all the documents. So it's been great. That's the end of my presentation, and now we can throw it open to questions.